welcome to this week's live. I am glad to be back. I'm starting a couple of minutes late. There was a bit of technical trouble this side, but here I am. So it's good to be back with you again, and I am looking forward to talking about this topic, which I think has been talked about by a few people in the language community, and I've definitely shared something on it myself on Twitter. And I could see that there was interest in the end of last week's live. I got a question about AI and my thoughts on it. And I thought maybe we could have more of a discussion about the whole idea of AI, what it means to language learning, what it means to language professions, because I think that this is something people will talk about, and whether it's you worrying about it or thinking about it or imagining what that means, and how it could be useful or how it could be a threat to language learning and language roles and positions, or whether it's something that comes up in conversation and people say things like, and these are the kinds of things I've heard in the past, especially when Google Translate became a thing, well, no need for anybody to learn languages anymore. There's no need to do all of this because computers will be able to do it all for us. And I think that's the real crux of what we're talking about when we discuss these matters. It's these conversations, these comments, these commentaries that we will inevitably get as to whether or not it's worth learning a language and worth following professions where your language and language knowledge is useful and needed, and whether or not these things will go away. And I think that's the great debate, isn't it, when it comes to this. Now, I just want to acknowledge that I heard that other people have talked about this, and so I haven't really watched many other people's discussions on this, except for things that I've seen online randomly. I haven't sought them out, and I particularly haven't done that because I'm a great believer in sort of having a conversation that I will have from my own thoughts first of all, and not to make it a copy of something everyone else is saying about this. And I have heard thoughts, and I've obviously seen things written, and I've got a few things here that I thought was interesting. So I mean, on LinkedIn, Carlos actually linked to a video that he made talking about this topic, which you can go and find on YouTube as well. He is I maybe can put it actually in the description here after the video, and also there are other people saying that they are excited about the idea of talking about this. On Instagram, I got a comment saying it's allowing us to choose the tone of the translation format: casual, slang, polite. Robots will take over the world and invent a new language. We'll be forced to speak, is what multilingual Matt says. No, I don't know I'm going to go with that multilingual Matt, but I think it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. I like it. I like this. Lil Polyglotter says democratization of access and massive disruption. Okay. Skrivexperten says I haven't really grasped the whole thing. Okay. And then on Twitter, I got a comment from Gray saying that basically he's been using ChatGPT to be talking to and just having a chat with, and says it's felt like talking to a busy professor at Oxford University, which I think is quite a funny analogy. Unajit says AI is still very distant from replacing human labourers. However, there is great commotion because of recent progress of a technology called ChatGPT, but AI is still far away. Can you please? And then I'm missing the rest of the comment because I foolishly didn't screen capture the whole thing, but that's on me, and I will just see if I can manage to no, I can't, unfortunately. I can't access it, but I will expand on sort of my thoughts on this, and I thank you all as well for your thoughts and your considerations and for writing. Also, any comments or any topics you'd like me to talk about in the future, please do let me know. Let me know on any of the social media platforms. You can tag me on videos that you think raise interesting discussions for these lives, and I'm very, very happy to be part of that. There are lots of topics to cover when it comes to language, culture, and how we explore the world. And I think that there are plenty of things where you would possibly want to hear different opinions, and I'm very, very open to those different opinions and to exploring them with you. So, without further ado, my thoughts on AI. It feels a bit like when Google Translate became a thing and people started talking about not needing translators anymore, that we'd be able to translate everything and we wouldn't have to worry. And I definitely remember when I was at work, people thinking that you could replace people with translators. And this was particularly not necessarily people on my team or people I worked with directly, but there were certain discussions particularly with clients, and clients had this weird idea that from now on you'd be able to just put in a text in English and you would have a lovely version in all the different languages. And of course we know now, with hindsight of course, that I think hopefully everyone agrees that just doesn't work, because the technology for translating language actually has improved significantly. Google Translate has improved significantly from when it first came out. I remember when I first used it, I was very excited about the idea, and I put in English. I wanted to find out how to say that someone was in high spirits, and it was just in English, and I put it into English, and I translated it into Spanish. And at that point, when it was all new, it translated as tiene mucho alcohol, which means the person has a lot of alcohol, in high spirits, which obviously is not what in high spirits means. And this is just one example. Now, that itself possibly wouldn't be a mistake anymore, and I think that they have advanced to the point where that kind of typical saying, very well-known saying, is now translated correctly in Google. But, and this is the big but, there are many, many ways of expressing things that are not easily translatable. There are going to be certain spheres of technology that will lend themselves better even. I can't even speak English. My Google Translate's not working, obviously. But when Google Translate came and started being a thing, there were certain types of text that would work better than others, and that would be things that were maybe things to do with instructions, things to do with more technical type things that didn't have plays on words, didn't have certain types of idiomatic constructions, didn't have any slang in them, didn't have variations to sort of be a little bit more expressive. It was just very straightforward. This language, this word, this is the translation. And even they don't work perfectly, and we see this quite often when we see these types of automatic translations in instructions, and you see them in different languages, and they don't always make sense. So I think generally we can agree that people are still needed to be able to do these translations after the advent of Google Translate. Now, ChatGPT and other types of bots like this, when it comes to translation, are possibly going to get better, and they are going to get better because what we've developed over the advent of Google Translate to now is the large corpus that we have of language. And what I mean by this is that the internet is continually growing with more and more information, more and more words, more and more sentences, example sentences. And the reason why you will see, for example, an ability to create things in English better than, say, in other languages is because there's a huge corpus of English materials online that any AI can then use, take advantage of, and guess what would come next in a sequence of words. And this is what AI does. It basically will see patterns in vocabulary that are used and have been used in the past by humans and would likely be used again. So a little bit like how your predictive texting works, it would second guess what you're going to say next. And so it would come up with a flow. And obviously this is more advanced than just simple predictive texting because it's taking it to quite a large degree when it's writing and composing stories, for example. Now, there are several areas where this could be a useful tool and already are useful tools. So in September, I spent a day at the Memrise offices, and one of the things that Memrise was doing was getting on board with the whole AI thing, and they created the thing called Membot. And what Membot did was it allowed the user to practice the language with the Membot. So basically you could speak to the AI in whichever language, and there were several languages I used to speak to the Membot, and the Membot would understand what I was saying. It would write it, so I would say it, it would write it, it would send it off, and then I would get a response from Membot, and the response would come first of all in written form, and then basically you could play the written form out loud and hear it spoken in an AI voice. And this works pretty well for quite a few things, and for many of the languages, particularly the languages that have a large corpus of material behind them, this worked pretty well. You could have quite a good conversation. It was very good for practicing and drilling some things that you wanted to use and learn to use and feel comfortable using on a daily basis. For that purpose, this Membot was a useful tool for language learning. Is it going to teach you the language outright? Is it going to replace language courses? Because I think this is what we're talking about, right? At this point in time, I'm not convinced yet. I think that this is not replacing courses at the moment, and I don't think it's replacing books or storybooks or bilingual readers or things like that just yet. And the reason I don't think that is because it's not 100%, and not everything that AI can feed you in all of the world's languages. Obviously it can't do some of them, can't do a great majority of them in fact, because it doesn't have the material available to make predictions on how the language should be, let alone getting it right, let alone saying things without grammatical or just odd word choices. Now, to learn a language, sometimes the logic is not always there, because human language, whilst sometimes it can feel like there's a logic to it, sometimes that logic is quite difficult to really get under the skin of and understand. Why you would say one thing over another, and why there are some exceptions, and why you would have turns of phrase that would sound like one thing but mean the complete opposite. So they are getting better. This idea of the Membot, for example, Memrise, is very, very good. It would definitely help to practice drilling things. Are we there with completely doing away with people in the process? No. From what I've seen, it's good for exactly that, for drilling, for practicing, but needs tweaking. And so you see this as well when you look at texts from ChatGPT. Sometimes they can sound a bit weird. They still need a little bit of a tweak. And I've played with ChatGPT in English, and some of the texts are great, but it's not a perfect thing. And the fact that you can actually check to see whether or not something is automatically generated and used and created by a bot and not by a human, you can tell that difference still. Technology can tell that difference. Would indicate to me that we're not quite there with the technology in terms of using it for a natural language learning as the only thing to use. So I still think the courses, and I think that stories are fairly safe. I do think that it will add to the experience because on ChatGPT, if you've not tried this yet, one thing you can do already is, and I've done this before, where you write in, please create a story where you teach English-speaking children the word for fish in French. And ChatGPT will come back to you with a story, and it will say, one day Susan and Matthew went to the river, and they were looking in the river, and Matthew said to Susan, regarde un poisson. Un poisson is the French word for fish, and they went fishing and they caught le poisson, and they took the poisson home, and whatever they did with the poisson, I don't remember what it was, but it was that kind of thing where it was quite cute. Very basic story, but very cute. And certainly there will be options to use that more in the future, to write stories, to teach yourself words, to teach children words, things like that. And I think that's something that you're seeing happening already, where you've got this myriad of people on TikTok and different platforms talking about creating children's books and things. I think that's going to be an extension of that, where they just basically get AI to write a story, then they get AI to create images to go with that story, and they create a book, they put it on Amazon, and then they sell it and they make money. And this is something people can potentially do with language stories, to teach children words or to teach adults words. So I can see there's a practical application. So it would definitely be something that could come into the market for that type of activity. I'm still not convinced that it will come to be to the same level as books that are written by humans at that level right now. I think that this will take time, and I don't know if we'll ever get there, but this is one application of it that I think is pretty good, and definitely as an extension of this. I read in my readings that this is something that Benny Lewis has talked about and used, is creating memory hooks with ChatGPT or AI generally, with stories, to be able to remember words and retain them more easily. So come up with something fun, something imaginative, and this is something you could do for your memory hooks, to retain vocabulary, to retain certain phrases, asking vocabulary learning app that you use, and just doing that will help you to retain the vocabulary. Hey, I edited Richard. Hello, the video got stuck. Am I back? Am I back okay now? Hopefully. I'm getting the same... Oh my word. Your connection is unstable. I'm getting that on YouTube. I had a problem with Instagram and now on YouTube. I'm not sure what's going on. But I hope you can hear me. So basically if you use this to create images to go with your new vocabulary, then oh dear. Oh dear, I'm guessing that's not a good let me see. Let me see. Sorry, I'm getting a strange message here on YouTube to say that the connection's unstable. I have no idea why, but dear. Okay, it was on Instagram and now it's on YouTube. What a pain. Okay, so let me just see if you write on. I have a report that Japanese news about. Okay. Am I back on both? Please let me know if you can see me on both. If I'm not, I think that YouTube is not working. Unfortunately, I don't know why. That's super frustrating. Okay. Maybe it's AI sabotaging my connection because they don't want me to put fake news out there. I don't know. Who knows, eh? Maybe. Although I am seeing questions coming up. YouTube is not working. Okay, Instagram is fine now. Okay, that's very odd. Thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it. Yeah, so this is one of the ways that I think it's going to be useful as a tool for language learning. You're doing the kind of things that I've discussed just now about like Benny creating language memory hooks with the aid of stories and sort of memory. I'm going to try and say it. Mnemonics. My word. I don't know why I can never say that word properly, especially when I think about it. Mnemonics. It's not going to happen, is it? But that kind of thing is quite useful for the language learning process. Oh dear. I'm going to ask. I will tell our people on YouTube to hop over to Instagram. Okay. So, see, I think that there's a benefit to the whole AI for language learning potentially in that regard. I also think that the getting more and more of sort of an expanded, extended corpus in many more languages is eventually going to help with easing the process of translation of documents, of words, of texts, of whatever, and also to use these words, use these phrases, and use grammar potentially in context that makes sense. So being able to build examples up. So I think that there's going to be an aid to being able to do that. When it comes to using AI to have conversations, so one of the things that I shared recently was with a piece of software called NVIDIA, and what they were proposing was you'd have a meeting, there'd be 4 people speaking 4 different languages, and NVIDIA would translate the person's voice, and I say their voice because they were translating the words but keeping the voice of the person in the new languages, which sounds really cool, and definitely is something that we're seeing a lot of, where people are able to clone their voice and then use it to say different things, which is fantastic. Fantastic for certain things, I guess, but that's something that already exists, right, as technology, and the idea that you would then have the language and your voice used for the language and you'd be speaking it, yes, it sounds good. The reality is that on the fly, when people are just speaking like this, there'll be delays, there'll be errors, there'll be things that aren't quite right, there'll be things like in Translate that you see online that don't quite follow what you want to say. And certain language combinations are harder to do than others. So just because if you use, for example, English as your default to other languages, tends to be okay. But remember when there were a lot of Syrian refugees coming over to Europe, and particularly to Germany, there was a great drive to try and improve the German to Arabic and Arabic to German translation accuracy, because it wasn't there. And it wasn't there probably because it wasn't used as much, and there wasn't as much of a corpus there between the two. So these things take time to develop, and if you're on a call and you're talking in, say, I don't know, Spanish, and somebody else is speaking in pick a language, any language, let's say Arabic, let's say Hindi, is the translation, the automatic translation, going to work as well as, say, for example, English and Hindi, where there will be way more material translated from Hindi into English and English into Hindi, just because of history. So these are also things that we have to bear in mind, and these take time and people's input. They take a lot of time to do this. Now, we add to this problem the issue that the more and more we create with AI, the more and more we have documents and corpus generally that would need to be excluded from natural speech. Because if AI starts translating itself and using that and adding that into the corpus, this is actually going to make a problem for AI in the future, because it will start using odd collocations of language. It will potentially not be using things that are authentic and feel right to the speakers of the language. So it's going to be translating itself, as that would be a bigger body of the corpus. So this is an issue for people in the tech business and in AI to consider. The issue is that the issue is really that we would need to have a situation where there is more content created by people and less by machines. Now, one of the things that I have been playing with as well over recent times is is Wikipedia. On Wikipedia, if you go to a document and you create a new language version of an English version, for example, you translate it into a different language, which I think is a very good thing to do, particularly in languages that are not represented very well online. And I would encourage any of you to do that. I think that as part of bolstering and supporting Indigenous, endangered and vulnerable languages particularly, if you have language skills in those types of languages, then please do consider adding your voice and translating things in Wikipedia into those languages, so that there's more corpus there for people to use to learn and to support people who speak the language. The issue is that at the moment in Wikipedia, what you can do, and it can be a help, but you can actually click to just have it translated automatically into any of the Google Translate languages. So I did this with an article into Macedonian, and generally speaking, actually, a lot of the translation, the automatic translation, wasn't too bad. I haven't been through it yet to correct different things, but I did notice certain keywords were wrong. And I did it on particularly on a type of bird, and I just translated it automatically from Google Translate first of all to see what it looked like, and I've just been playing with it really more than anything else. But I noticed that there were issues with, for example, translations of certain bird terminology, and this is something that I'm fairly keen actually on having represented better online, because the Wikipedia site for Macedonian, for example, on birds is wanting, and I don't know, I like bird terminology, so I will at some point go and try and improve some of these things, and also talk to people who have grown up only speaking Macedonian or speaking Macedonian at home only, and making sure that I don't come up with my own Macedonian version, because it's whilst it is my home language, it's not the language I grew up speaking, but I can see that the translation is not perfect, and I can imagine that many people would go into Wikipedia and be very tempted to just click on translating everything and create lots of AI versions, Google Translate versions of the language. And what that would do is create a lot of incorrect versions for AI to draw on, so therefore AI would be extremely flawed in that way. This was a big news story actually with the Scots language, where there was an individual who translated Scots Wikipedia a few years ago into Scots, and wasn't the first language speaker of Scots, but had a dictionary and time and wanted to do something positive and good. And unfortunately, whilst the desire and the motivation were very, very positive, the actual resulting language that came out of it was flawed and not representative of how Scots is spoken and used in Scotland. The good thing that came out of that as well was that it got people talking in Scotland about their language and about how to help, just adjust the articles to make them read in a more correct fashion against what they speak. And so it's not always bad news, but what it does mean is that while we've still not got this sorted, what we can't do is rely on AI technology to potentially create this, because I think there are going to be iterations of how AI will need to be tweaked and adjusted to be able to compensate for these kinds of I'm going to use the word lazy human interactions of just translate button and then think that that's a done job and that we can move forward, because that's going to take a lot of correction and it's going to take human eyes to make sure that works. Now, with bigger languages that have, and when I say bigger languages, I mean languages that have more resources online and are better represented online, like English or French or German or Spanish or Chinese, or many of these languages will have a lot of content online. They're less likely to be affected by these kinds of issues, but a number of other languages are more likely to be affected, and so I think it's going to take time and consideration, and rushing ahead and pretending that this is all good and we can press a button and we have perfect AI translations that obviously we know already are not perfect. And also the creation of a corpus needs to be done in a way that is really fair and done in a way that makes sense and also fairly represents the language that's used and how it should be used. I think all of these things need to be taken into account when we come to AI. So are there effects of this? Possibly. Effects as in people's perceptions, unfortunately, I think is one of the things that we need to discuss, and that is that, like with Google Translate, as I said in the beginning, people will often jump to the wrong conclusions as to what's possible and what isn't possible. They will overestimate the ability of this platform to do something that it cannot possibly do at the moment, and then there's the management of these systems and the corpus that they draw from to create the language and sort of display it. We will need to make sure we take that on board before we run off and just use these exclusively to either learn or create documents or translate things. I think that the practical applications for the AI technology that we're seeing now really is limited to, and this isn't a small limitation, this is quite a great use for it, is to get the gist of things that are being said potentially in documents. The ability to summarize documents in one language and then have that summary translated might be quite useful to have an idea of what's going on, because in a world where we get lots and lots of messages and lots of text, to be able to have that summarized is useful. The other things that I think it's useful for is, for example, as a tourist, if you go on holiday and you want to, as we do with Google Translate now, you can have things translated automatically. It can tell you how to say certain tried and used and proven sentences. I think they're getting pretty good at that. So you could, like for example, ask for things in a coffee shop, ask for the directions and things like that. Are you going to understand everything? Only if that person has the time and inclination to speak in a very standard way and give you an answer. So I remember Alex Rawlings tried this out with an automatic translator on the streets of Catalonia. I believe it was I don't know if it was in Barcelona or another city in Catalonia, so I'm going to say Catalonia. And he went round with somebody else and asked for directions, and it didn't really give directions in the translation of what was given as an answer back in a very coherent manner. And that's because we learn, get to the second street on the right, turn left, and then when you get to the corner, turn right, and when you see the church, it's opposite the church. And it's kind of things like that, right, that you learn in language. But the reality is that when people give directions, they say things like, well, you know where the corner of this road is, and you'll see there's a McDonald's on the opposite side. Well, you need to be on that side of the road, but actually where there's a key cutter, you'll see there's a place where they make keys, and you go over to that side of the road on the opposite side from McDonald's, and then you'll walk down, and then you'll get to a place where you'll see a garage, and that garage is I can't remember the name of it, but it's kind of blue, and they go into this whole story of what it is, right? Because they're visualizing it, they're imagining the way very often as to where they're going for many people, and some people will give directions in different ways, but many times you will get these very detailed directions or very visual directions that only make sense when you then walk. And translating that into another language can get very convoluted, and knowing what's important can be very complicated too. So I don't think this moves us a huge amount further when it comes to translating on the fly. I think it's going to help. There have been translation devices before, and they work to a degree, but I don't think we're there yet. We're definitely not on the Star Trek where you've got this implant in your brain or the computer automatically translates everything. I don't think we're there yet. I think it's a great add-on that we've got this voice recognition that sort of will use your voice to say something. That feels very Star Trek-y, and I think that's really cool. I think it will just continue to improve. I think we are seeing improvements. I don't think we're there for things that are high-level diplomacy or things that require real precision and experience to say things in a way that's going to be comprehensible. Language has a really weird way of sounding like it should sound on the page, and then the reality of how you actually express it to people is tied to the culture as well. So setting the scene can be very important. So in English, you can sometimes, when I'm speaking English, I can often allude to something that happened in the past and move forward with the conversation. If I speak Macedonian, I have to set the scene, because that's not how Macedonians communicate. They don't allude to things that happened in the past that you didn't hear about, and you piece them together in the conversation. A Macedonian speaker would be completely lost if I were to do that. So you have to set the scene, and this is probably the bigger learning curve for me as somebody who's used to putting out their thoughts in a certain way than the actual learning of the language. Because you can have the words and then just not communicate effectively because you don't say them in a way that people are used to hearing them. And so I don't know if we're there 100% yet. And this is possibly one of the reasons why I think that, particularly in oral form, it might be quite challenging. So yeah, okay. And I don't know how they do with prepositions as well, because I'm just thinking of it like an example, So an example with a preposition in, say, I'm going to use English and Macedonian because they're both home languages for me, and they're both probably as different as they're going to get in terms of Indo-European languages. So for example, if I know that if a Macedonian speaker says in English, I'll be there for 5 minutes, that the chances are they don't mean they will be there for 5 minutes. They mean they'll be there in 5 minutes. And the reason is that for and in Macedonian with time expressions are the opposite way round. So in a week, I will go to Spain for 3 days. If you were to say that in Macedonian, you would say for a week, I will go to Spain. For a week. So you would basically say for instead of in, and then I will be there. Actually, you would say on. So not even in or on, but you can translate because it depends on the context. But yeah, you would say it basically the opposite way around. And this is whenever I even try and explain this, if I hear it and I hear somebody saying it, I always check what the meaning is. So I don't normally speak to Macedonians in English, but I have heard them say it, and I always check those kinds of things if I'm in a situation where I hear they say that in English, because I know that is a common misunderstanding between the two languages. And there will be other things as well that people will not understand as the same thing at all. Culturally, things that are said in one language, a word might have a very different meaning in one to another. It has different imagery, different context, different things that you can and can't say, things that, and just think about politeness and how direct you may be in English and not in Japanese, for example. And you need to talk around things. So no one ever told me, when I learnt the word sumimasen in Japanese for excuse me, no one ever told me that actually really can mean thank you in many situations. So in a restaurant, for example, I wouldn't necessarily, when I was in Japan, when I first went, I was saying arigato, and they said that it's not what you say. You don't say arigato necessarily. You would say, oh, sumimasen, and then you would do the things, and that was your kind of thank you, which I don't, because in the dictionary and in most places, you're not going to see that written, right? You're going to see arigato is thank you, and sumimasen is excuse me. But actually, sumimasen can be thank you as a more natural translation. So you can see there are many, many issues that it would take time to get through. And how would AI know what to choose when? These are all questions linked to cultural norms and how people use the language in real life. Wow, I've spoken for a while, and I appreciate that. Actually, I think YouTube just died because, it just died. So I'm very, very sorry on YouTube. I will do my best to sort of figure out what to do with this. Possibly download the Instagram feed and add it to YouTube afterwards, and hope for the best. But I will do my best to go through the questions. So I'll have a look at the questions now. I'm on Instagram. Wow. There are quite a lot of questions, quite a lot of comments, or hellos, or I don't know, a lot of activity anyway. Let me see if I can make sense of any of it and answer what I can. Hello everyone. Yes, thank you very much. Salam. Yes, nice to see you. Hindi. No, unfortunately I don't speak Hindi. I know some words, but I don't speak it. Maybe one day. ¿Cómo estás? Saludos desde Chile. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Todo bien? Sí, estoy bien, gracias. Hello. So, sounds good. Good. Let me see if I can see. Eres un grande, gracias. It's very kind of you. Let me see. So, basically, I mean, there's a lot to say on this topic, and there's a lot to consider, I think. And I hope that what I've said sort of gets you thinking to actually the issues that I see that are coming up for AI and that need to be resolved. And I think we are still away from it. I know that things are moving quite quickly, and I'm very excited by the whole thing about AI and what it can do and how it can actually enhance our lives. I think it's quite exciting. I'm just cautious about how this corpus will be developed, particularly in languages that are not well represented at this point. Okay. False cognates will destroy AI translation. I hope. Yeah, false cognates. Sometimes, that will also be difficult. Absolutely agree. Let me see. Hello. Okay. Okay, the stream is working. Fantastic. Wow. Doing my best to see all the questions. It's a bit difficult because there are. The thing with Instagram is that it really shows you so much detail of people joining and that's lovely to see people joining. But when you're trying to look for questions, it can be a little bit complicated because I get lots and I wave at everybody as well, which is something I like to do because I think it's nice to do this. Admire you so much. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you, Andre. Thank you so much. It's very kind of you. Let me see, because I wave at everyone. I try to wave at everyone. Um, and then I get a notification to say I waved at people, which is fantastic. Hello, hello, yes. Okay, morning, yes, hello. Let's see. Your live is not working. Yeah, on YouTube, yes, exactly. On Instagram, it was in the end, which is good. I'll just wave at some more people. I didn't wave at in the beginning. Let's see. For me, the danger AI that it confidently asserts falsehoods, and even makes up fake references that appear plausible to someone not knowledgeable about a specific area. I absolutely agree, and that's kind of what I'm talking about with this idea of AI created texts, and for those to be added into the corpus, because as soon as you add falsehoods, I think it's a good word, falsehoods into a corpus, whether that's linguistically inaccurate representations of the language and how it's used by its speakers, or things that are just not true, that's problematic, because how do you discern what's right and what's wrong, what you should include, what you shouldn't include? How do you do that if you have everything created by AI? And this is, I think, going to be the biggest problem. I foresee this as being the biggest issue with AI. And I don't know how much that's being talked about. I think people talk about AI and how we can use it and how it's great. And I agree that there's a lot of very, very good things about AI. I really do. But this is one of the issues. I am going to go back to the stream from YouTube from earlier, because I know that there were some questions on there. And I just want to make sure that what this is on AI. Okay, okay, let's see. ChatGPT. Okay, ChatGPT. Where is Richard? And Philippe Tremblay writes, ChatGPT, I'm sorry, I don't have enough information to determine who Richard is, where he might be, located. Could you please provide more information? Okay, so it's just you. I love it. That's hilarious. Okay, there's pretty soon will be its slaves. Oh yeah, so chat will be the slaves of AI. I hope that's an overestimation. ChatGPT knows Richard, actually. Apparently, oh wow. Just tested. As an AI language model, I don't have access to real-time information about individuals, including Richard Simcott. However, Richard Simcott is a well-known polyglot and a language enthusiast who has two. Oh wow, it knows who I am. I feel like I've finally made it in life. If ChatGPT knows who I am, that's incredible. Well, I mean, I suppose there are articles about me. Bobby Virtual. Hello. ChatGPT is more personalized version of Google search engine. Yeah. AI learns folks that what many of them are missing, and much faster than human, and very quickly, and it can have problems. We need ethics discussion as a society. Yeah, I think there's the ethics issue potentially as well. Well, not potentially, there is an ethics discussion as well to be had there. I think you're right, Yoga Bliss. The scarier thing for me right now is a whitewashing of certain languages online. So, as for example, Google Translate adds more languages, this is a celebrated and highlighted as a great thing, which I believe is a good thing, that we have more languages represented. But if we don't have the body of work in these languages online with the necessary vocabulary or instances of how the words are put together, it creates holes that AI could potentially fill in on our behalf. And this is an issue for example, indigenous, endangered and vulnerable languages, where certain topics of conversation haven't come up or have not been agreed as to how you discuss them. And that takes time. I mean, at the moment I'm learning Cornish, right? So, and I talk about Cornish a fair amount, but it's a good example, because there are certain aspects of our lives that in the Cornish groups that I go to, even the very advanced speakers, have to stop and think about how they would express certain things or talk about certain topics. And so I'm just trying to imagine a world where we finally get Cornish added to, sort of Google Translate or something like that. Where's the body of work coming from to create this? And is it based on authentic material that has been agreed with the community that, as being how they would say it and use it? And if it isn't or it hasn't, then there's a problem. Yep. Richard, Spanish, please. Hola. Lo siento, estaba hablando en inglés todo el rato. Pero sí que puedo hablar en español más si quieres, pues hay que preguntar cosas en español, voy a hablar en español, no pasa nada. I think ChatGPT could be great for learners and teachers in creating example sentences for vocabulary. And yep, that's true. And certain grammar points, yep. You could even create small stones or small stories, yeah, at appropriate levels. It's like stones. My word, my eyes are failing me, unfortunately. But yeah, short stories at different levels. Absolutely, yeah. That's exactly one of the things I was talking about with the stories. You could definitely do that, and I think that would be a good use of it, for sure. And yeah, really good observation. Oh, Ivan Ivanov, what are your 3 desert island languages? Wow. Well, if I'm on a desert island, I suppose I'm not going to be talking to anyone, so... feels a bit weird. Am I going to have anyone to talk these languages to if they're desert island languages? I don't know. I really don't know. Probably a language that's... So my main home language would probably be Macedonian and English as my main home languages. And then probably if I had a third language, I would say I would probably pick Cornish, just because that's the language I'm really enjoying at the moment and have been for the last couple of years, and I still don't speak it particularly well. Yep. Which says new text that doesn't need to be translation lang to lang, but crops in both instead and can learn via text from any language to a language will help rare languages. And this is the thing, right, is I don't know. It depends on how it's done. So I think that one of the saving graces for many of these languages could be if we could use the technologies to scan texts and books and then have those as the basis for the corpus for AI to draw on, instead of relying on things that people have just made up online or translated automatically via Google Translate online and tweaked even maybe, but are not correct. Because we have a lot of things like that people do, and that's not a good representation of the language. But unfortunately, the less a language is represented online by authentic materials, the more these kinds of issues will arise, because they will have an over-representation of inauthentic language, and that's the big issue I'm scared of for them. Let me see. How in spirits in Spanish you can use the phrase "estoy de buen ánimo." Yeah, that's a nice translation. Estoy de buen humor. Yep, both phrases convey a positive and cheerful state of mind. They do indeed. Yep. Could you also use the phrase "estoy animado," which means I am feeling animated? Yeah, that would be a problem in English, right? If you were to translate that automatically, I wonder what they would give you. Estoy animado, because if in English, you can be animated. For example, somebody who's animated, it's a description of, so like an actor like Jim Carrey, you could describe him as an animated character. He's very animated in terms of his facial expressions and things like that. But yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be the same thing, right? That you want to say if you had that translated into Spanish, está animado, it would be slightly different. Yeah. How's your Hungarian? Terrible, even absolutely terrible. I've bought books and I would love to learn more, but I did a sort of a 1 month challenge with Pimsleur years ago, and I still know a lot of the stuff that was in that, so I can still ask for things and ask for directions and stuff, but not particularly well. I do have books though that I brought back from Budapest recently, and hopefully, okay, I believe I got to the end of these. Yeah, okay. I got to the end of those questions on YouTube, and I am back to Instagram, and I'm just going to check to see if I have any more things that I can answer on here. Okay. I see questions. Okay, I see comments here. Human translation. It's so much more expensive. Yeah, and consuming that majority of translations that it makes no economic sense to keep using the former. Yeah, AI is good enough to be used widely for many things. Absolutely, for many. This is why I say for many things it will be used, for example, by people to summarize text, get an idea of what's going on. But I think where things need to be precise, then the human translation is still going to be necessary. Particularly for things like marketing materials and stuff. I don't think AI is going to be able to do that. So there's certain things yes, other things no. I think they'll need to be checked by humans. So I think maybe the translation services that we see will have more of this sort of proofreading type things involved. You'll only have ChatGPT to talk to on your what? Sorry, on your desert island. Yeah, don't say that. Imagine just talking to ChatGPT on desert island. On my word, that would be quite crazy. Yeah, hopefully not. So unfortunately, with YouTube today, we didn't have a very good run of it, and we had a bit of a hiccup with Instagram. I'll post this to YouTube as well, just so that the people on YouTube see that I didn't just abandon ship and did carry on. But otherwise, I will finish here for today, and I wish you all a very pleasant Sunday. I'll start to the week wherever you are in the world. And I will look forward to speaking to you all again next week. I may change times, it just depends on what's happening, because next week is a holiday, and so I'm not sure of what our whereabouts will be, but I will let you know, and I may change the time to make it work, to make it a little bit later, or potentially a bit earlier, but I think probably later might be more reasonable, more realistic. Otherwise, I may even change it to Saturday. I know, right? I'm living on the wild side. But anyway, it was nice to spend time with you, and I hope that you found this discussion about AI useful. Thank you for contributing, for asking questions, and I will look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Take care, and enjoy your next week of language learning, and I'll see you all soon. See you then. Bye bye.